My name is Tyler Rinn. I'm the project developer with HIllman Energy, representing HIllman Energy Center this evening. HIllman Energy Center is a 125 megawatt battery storage facility located at 75 and 73 Hillman Street, located near the Grid Swamp and the National Grid substation just north of Main Street in downtown Tewksbury. We are here this evening to request an exemption from the local bylaws, zoning bylaws, and to construct a 125 megawatt, 500 megawatt hour standalone battery storage facility. The project will also include a 1,200-foot transmission line crossing 4 parcels, 4 of which 3 parcels are owned by National Grid and 1 is owned by the MBTA. Here you can see an aerial rendering of the battery storage facility. On the south there is Hillman Street, and on the east is Clinton Street. You can see the sound walls on the southern portion and the eastern portion, and all of the BESS units and inverters on the site. On the north of the site, you can see the collector substation, which will take the power from those batteries and transmit it over to the National Grid substation, which was seen in the previous photo. I know there are going to be a lot of questions this evening around environmental impact of a project of this type, and quickly wanted just to run through some of those impacts and mitigations that the company is taking. First, air emissions. There are no air emissions during operation. That's because it just sits there like a substation. Stormwater is going to meet or exceed all of the Mass DEP stormwater standards. Wetlands, there are no direct impacts to wetlands or vegetated wetlands along the project site. We are in a buffer zone, which the local conservation committee has jurisdiction over, but there are no direct impacts to wetlands. Of those buffer zones, we are meeting all state and local performance standards for those wetland resource areas. Noise, I'm sure, is a large concern here this evening. Massachusetts DEP has a stringent noise policy that the project will adhere to through low noise equipment, sound attenuation barriers, and operating restrictions at night. Solid and hazardous waste release. There is no hazardous or solid waste as a part of this project. Cultural resources. We have done a cultural resource analysis and consulted with the Mass Historical Commission, and they have indicated that there are no Mass Historical cultural issues or resources in the vicinity of the site. And then finally, traffic. Once operational, there will be no traffic at the site. There will be about 1 vehicle per day at the maximum for kind of normal maintenance and things like that. Fire safety is obviously another large concern, so I just wanted to quickly run through this and then happy to answer more questions later. This site will be 24/7, 365 days a year monitored by somebody watching screens, analyzing what is happening at the facility, and making sure that it is operating correctly. Those staff that are monitoring those facilities can shut down any sort of battery or units that are not operating correctly. These batteries also include thermal management systems inside of the containers that meet all of the industry standards around testing and safety. We also have to adhere to countless codes and standards, the main ones being the NFPA 855 standard for the installation of energy storage systems. This is codified in the Massachusetts Fire Code and regulates how these battery facilities have to be operated, maintained, decommissioned, all of that. As a part of that, there is also UL 9540 and UL 9540A, which are regulatory testing that we have to go through, where they test what happens to batteries when they are exposed to fire and catch on fire, what happens for propagation and all of that, and make sure that if a battery does catch on fire, it doesn't propagate to its neighbors. Finally, as a part of NFPA 855, there's also a requirement for annual fire training with the fire department. We've already met with them on numerous occasions to discuss the emergency response plan that we are developing as part of this property and this project, and plan to continue that partnership throughout the life of this project. That's it for the presentation. I wanted to make sure there was time for everybody to speak, answer questions. So I look forward to hearing from everybody. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Presiding Board. I'd like to note tonight I'm joined with, I'm sorry, can folks hear me? You all got to get taller. I'd like to note tonight that I'm joined by Mr. Vitale of Rep. Howard's office. She's trying to make her way right now. Her hearing got held up, and if any of you came from the greater Boston area right now, you understand the struggle. But since I don't wish to hold up the good members of Tewksbury tonight, I'm going to read some remarks on behalf of her and I'll clarify which ones are just myself, and when she arrives, or she'll follow up with her own testimony to further clarify. But Mr. Vitale is going to be here with me because he was also instrumental working with Rep. Howard and myself in capturing some of the concerns that we shared, I have, and that also that those members of the general public have. There's nothing quite a politician loves more than talking about themselves a little bit. So to give you context about myself, I have been a member of the Energy and Telecom Utility and Energy Committee since I was first elected. It's something I specifically asked for along with appointment to Environmental Affairs. I say that to give you my empathy and understanding your struggle in ensuring that we balance the protections of our local residents while also providing a clean and affordable grid and electrical availability to those that need to utilize it here in the Commonwealth. I also tell you that to give you the context of the lens that I'm approaching it through, that even though I myself, as part of my duties as state representative, try to move the Commonwealth towards a more cleaner, sustainable grid, I cannot agree with the conclusion that Site 1, which is being chosen as the preferred applicant site, meets the safety and preservation of the neighborhood characteristics. So when this was first proposed, Representative Howard and I met with folks at Emerald Court, surrounding streets in the neighborhood, Tewksbury at large. And please don't panic, I'm not going to read all 12 pages, but we consolidated the majority of these complaints into several categories and overarching kind of subjects. They boil down to essentially environmental sensitivity, particularly around that of the neighboring Great Swamp, which we sustained within our research from going back to 2003. We suspect that it goes back further, this concern, both from the municipality and discussions with applicants that came forward, as well as residents during town meeting, during zoning and environmental protection discussion. But as I said, 2003 is where I found still available data we were going to provide to you electronically going that far back. You'll also find out we split it into noise and light disturbances as relative to other recently approved zoning and other approved projects within the neighborhood. And then questions about fire, and then also questions about the local infrastructure around that's able to support. So again, please don't panic. I'm not going to read all 12 pages. I'm just going to take the next 3 to 5 minutes to describe what you're going to hear from testimony from the folks in this audience. We have captured a number of specific stories, not all of them, but I don't want to hold up the good folks here tonight sharing their opinions and their concerns. But again, these will be reflected in the letter that we will bring to you. So to begin with, one of the questions that we had, both as the state delegation and as well on behalf of local residents, is precisely who is the power being shared with? As your mission here is to help guide and decide whether these projects for the benefit of the public at large, one of the things that we uncovered during our research is that there tends to be a reliance of these battery energy storage systems in entering a private power purchase agreement of sorts. So that was one of our large concerns, is that, yes, compared to other types of energy producing facilities, a BESS is cleaner. It might have some advantages on dispatchability and be able to connect to the grid and emit that energy. But is that energy going to the public at large? And is it meeting that threshold that you're examining today, whether or not it's going to bring utility, by the way of utility, to the people of Tewksbury in the greater area? We haven't been able to discern whether this electricity will be reserved for private use elsewhere or the public's benefit at large. And that's one of the questions that we'd like the siting board to explore with the applicant to ensure that any of these, and again, myself and most people in this room say no to the preferred site, but if they were to choose an alternative, it's one of the things that even if an alternative was chosen, we like to make sure that this is just a benefit for one specific private company elsewhere, but for all residents in the community at large. Moving on, for the noise and light impact, As you know, right now, the current use is a truck repair facility and a landscape company. It has loud and noisy operation, and the applicants will talk about how their noise and such is in alignment. That is true to an extent. The difference here, and it's a subtle difference, but it's an important one, is that the current use is more limited to your typical commercial and industrial hours. I'm not going to say it's exactly 9 to 5, and I understand during wintertime landscaping might run a little earlier or later because they typically get involved in snow removal. But it is a much different sort of, and I'm going to use Gen Z lingo here, a different vibe of business as compared to what the applicant is. So even though that the noise and light mitigation may occur, that's because the hours and the degree of the noise and light which are going to be occurring as opposed to the current use is that much different. That also sort of ties into other things, which is a step in the right direction as the applicant described. But even though, and this is my subtle but important distinction, is it the best use? Right now what they're arguing is it is a better use of the current site. But I want to highlight, is it the best use? Because as I'm going to explain here, the neighboring Great Swamp has been the subject for the last few decades, both in the community as a subject of zoning and environmental protection. Essentially, Hillman is located off of Old Boston Road, which is adjacent off of Main Street. And over the last few decades, even before I was here on this earth, that neighborhood's development has changed. As you can see on the map, the Great Swamp and surrounding areas are industrial. But if you and I took a ride down Main Street right now, you would see that despite being zoned industrial, the most industrial-esque development that's found in that neighborhood outside of the applicant's immediate neighbors is a used storage warehouse. It has industrial aesthetics, but it is a commercial venture. Everything else that's been developed in the community since 2006, which was a big turning point in development in that area, has been a dense residential, single-family, or commercial focus. I personally believe, and I'm not stating that this was the reason that the local officials and my predecessors on the state level chose when making these decisions, but this was a reaction to studies undertaken by the town in the 90s and 2000s that showed dense development and industrial development directly adjacent to the Great Swamp was causing hydrological issues elsewhere in the town. Now, the Great Swamp expands, it's the largest sole contributor to the 20% of the surface area in Tewksbury that's a wetland. It falls in between 4 watersheds for a river, including directly discharges in the Merrimack, and on the other side, a Heath Brook into one of our aquifers. Even though the applicant's chosen site is isolated from elsewhere, it is essentially one water entity. At times, it might be a little dry, but underneath it's all interconnected. Now, the applicant admittedly has less non-permeable surface and chemical use during their current site. But the trend that local and state officials have been working towards in development around the Great Swamp, be it towards individual applicants or our general infrastructure, has been moving to protect the environmental status and undo the damages of the development of the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s before they started wising up and adopting more modern. So, of course, we as public officials cannot tell the private market what to do. But my personal opinion, and I'm sure it's shared by many in the audience, is that a quieter residential or commercial use, or even open space preservation, given the industrial abuse that historically occurred on the property, is a more fitting type of development for the town to decide on moving forward. And again, it's through no fault of the applicant there that this was the historical precedent, but we're trying to clean it up now. And again, as I reiterate, the town was aware of this, and we're going to provide you with the actual study that occurred back in 2003, which explicitly suggested to the town that in the area of the Hillman neighborhoods and anything adjacent to the Great Swamp, that Tewksbury, with utmost priority, institute additional bylaws protecting that due to the ecological damaging that we were witnessing at the time. And I can tell you personally, as state representative, and there's some members of the select board here tonight, they've reached out to address flooding along Route 38. And I don't want to represent my opinion as theirs, but just as an example that this is still an ongoing issue now, in that this is from, again, not the applicant, but the previous development of the Hillman neighborhood. So I'm not a mind reader, but the trend of local development in that neighborhood has not been towards heavy industrial or utility-grade noise and pollution. It has been simple warehousing, occasional engine repair, and to be honest, the landscaper is probably the most industrial process going on there. So despite at first glance looking like this was a specific neighborhood cordoned off for intentional industrial development, it is not. The other big thing that you'll hear tonight, as I'm sure you've heard at many of these, is our concerns around the fire safety in the case of a mass casualty or mass evacuation incident. This was a bit frustrating, and I'm joined by now my aide, Ian Hatfield. These two gentlemen and Rep. Howard made sure that I wasn't going blind, because we, as we prepared, went back and took a look at the previous presentations that were put forth before your board. And on the Streamfield site in Westfield, we found 3 documents, all over 35 pages, that discuss things such as evacuation plans for the fire department, the burn rate of a cell versus a series of batteries versus a rack of batteries. And I know that we heard tonight that they're compliant with the Underwriter Lab 9540, the 9540A. I'm sure they have the off gas and the vents and all that such lined up. But the fire portion, despite us being able to fill several pages with questions, was at times a fruitless adventure because we simply were not able to locate the resources associated with the HIllman proposal that folks like you saw that were attached to proposals like this Streamfield proposal out in Westfield. Yet we found 3 documents there outlining the plans in case of an evacuation, in case of a fire outbreak, what the equipment was. And so we asked, as we move forward tonight, where can we find such information, and where can we find things like the third-party review on, God forbid, if this facility caught fire, on what the smoke plumage and such would be. But simply right now, and I'm willing to be embarrassed and have egg on my face, but I haven't been able to unlocate anything of substance that allows me to compare and ask the starting board and the applicant the concerns of the citizens in a way that is much more precise. So I know October 24th is coming up rapidly, and we're actually planning, Representative Howard and I have already discussed, expanding this letter once that information is made available. What you'll notice in the 12 pages that we're turning in is a bit anemic, I'm sure, compared to other testimony you solicited from officials, simply because I don't have the information to make that argument, which I think is problematic in and of itself at first. The other concern that we had, and that many of the residents shared, and this is the last topic, I'll wrap up and let them get at you, but the local road service and condition. I know that this facility most likely will be roboticized, but I urge you, if you haven't, go down and take a look at the neighborhood. As I said before, Route 38 now has truncated that portion of Old Boston Road. It was a quieter neighborhood with single-family homes until the mid-2000s. Then a few multifamily developments occurred, but it's all residential single-car traffic. And if you go back and you find yourself amongst the heavy industrial overlay in the businesses immediately adjacent to the applicant's parcel, the largest vehicle you're going to find down there is a 15-foot box truck for the party rental place. There's nothing with articulated beds, there's nothing with booms. There's nothing that we would consider even seeing common at a construction site. Their F-350 is probably one of the largest vehicles to go up and down the road that day. The reason that I urge you to go down is that even the construction phase has concerned us with road capacity. Because once you leave HIllman in the neighborhood, to get back on Route 38, and you can ask anyone in this audience, there are dozens of near misses a day. And those intersections, despite great efforts from our local officials to pressure the state, despite the delegation earmarking millions of dollars over the last several terms to improve Route 38, we're constantly being outpaced with growth elsewhere. So I understand we cannot tell people when and where not to drive. That's part of their freedom of movement. That said, creating this as a destination in the end for heavy vehicles, even during construction, is going to have downstream road impacts here, which we as a community have been fighting tooth and nail to get the state to notice and improve upon with varying degrees of success. So, as I mentioned, I wrap up so that folks here can substantiate everything I said with their own stories and comments. We'll be distributing to you each a copy of the physical letter, and then we'll be sending you all the things that you'll see cited in here electronically. I'm sorry, I just don't want to burden you with 100 some odd pages. But I ask you kindly tonight, as you listen to the residents, it's hard to argue that this is not a better use than what that is now. The real question, though, is this the best use? And hopefully you'll see, reading the letter, hearing the residents tonight, the last 25 years of development in Tewksbury has suggested that local and state over the years have said industrial is not the best use. And all the immediate surrounding properties have been a residential and commercial focus. And so before the board makes a decision, I ask that you take that in consideration of what the momentum and vision of Tewksbury was and ask, what is the best use for this? And I hope that you'll find that you'll agree that it's continued development of commercial and residential as we transform that neighborhood and patch up a zoning mistake from the 50s, 60s, or 70s and rectify it so that Tewksbury can permanently have a nice neighborhood in that area. So I avail myself to any questions from the board.
We look forward to receiving your longer comments and the additional materials that you talked about, which we will review as we move through the rest of this proceeding. Thank you.
Christine Chesbrough, CHESBROUGH, and my address is 398 Chandler Street, and I live in Tewksbury. Good evening. I have been a resident for Tewksbury for 28 years. I support clean energy, but this is not the right location and approach for a lithium battery facility. The company cares only about profit, not safety. One disaster could change this town forever. The proposed site already contaminated due to the current owner who has failed to follow safety and environmental policies. Additionally, the town has failed to enforce proper cleanup and accountability. Now, a lithium battery facility is proposed for this exact location and is being framed as a solution for cleaning up this area. However, the few benefits of this facility does not outweigh the cons. It is dangerously close to homes, schools, healthcare facilities, and essential services, creating a serious risk for the entire community. The site location is within 2 air miles of critical locations. There are active railroad tracks carrying hazardous materials only 400 feet away. Route 495 is less than a mile away. It is extremely close to schools, police and fire stations, assisted and retirement living facilities, the 911 Communication Center, Tewksbury Transit, and the State Hospital. Just 2.5 miles away is the Market Basket Distribution Center, which supplies over 95 grocery stores across 4 states. If the facility had a shutdown during an emergency, delivery trucks full of food would be stranded and cause a disruption in the food supply. This shows how deeply this project threatens not just our town, but the regional infrastructure we rely on. The Moss Landing, California fire forced a 3-mile evacuation. If an explosion or fire of the same intensity occurred in Tewksbury, all schools, businesses, all shelter locations, and other critical locations will need to evacuate. We do not have enough firefighters and police resources to focus both on disaster and evacuation. In the event of an emergency, time is critical. The nearest phone truck, I have been told, is located in Boston. For residents who work at home, how would they manage lost wages during an evacuation? For residents who do not work at home, how would they get back home during an evacuation to gather medicine, pets, family members, and other necessary resources? In the event of an evacuation, shelter would be required for thousands of residents. Where are they going to stay? What about pets and people with disabilities? Who is going to pay for this? East Point Energy is an LLC. They claim this facility will bring in tax revenue, but much of that will be spent on planning, protective gear, and emergency preparation before the town sees any benefit. Their business model is clear. They build these projects, they get them running, they sell or transfer them to avoid accountability, leaving the long-term responsibility behind. If the facility is sold, the town could face extra costs to coordinate with the new owner, while still paying wages for emergency planning and response. In the event of a fire or disaster, the company could walk away, leaving the town to manage the consequences. A recent survey and community feedback showing overwhelming opposition to this project. has shown that residents have serious concerns and believe the area is too congested for a facility of this type, which I'm going to email you the results. When you see elderly residents standing outside in 85-degree heat or rain holding protest signs because they are so afraid of what is coming, that should tell you something. Protect our town, our neighbors, and our local businesses. Stand with the people who actually live here in Tewksbury, whose lives will be directly affected, and say no to this project. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Linda Martin, Martin, and I live at 25 Emerald Court in Tewksbury. My condo is less than 600 feet from the proposed facility. In fact, I was told this by an employee of East Point Energy in March 18, 2025. Also on that date, an employee from the company told me not to worry about a thermal event. It wouldn't happen, they told me. And if it did, a response plan would be created after the facility was approved by the state. But when my neighbors spoke to the Tewksbury fire chief, they were told there would be no evacuation plan. Instead, residents would be required to shelter in place. This is not acceptable. Thermal events do happen, and I don't want to go over what will happen in a thermal event. But in 2025, there were 4 fires at lithium battery plants. The very large one at Moss Landing, a fairly other large one in Monterey County, in Boulder City, and Otay Mesa. In Moss Landing, there was a requirement of evacuation for 2 miles. The same 2 miles existed in Monterey County. Can residents of Tewksbury living with a 2-mile radius evacuate safely? Let me just talk about where I live. Emerald Court is home to 264 residents, all aged 55 and older. Many use walkers, have oxygen or wheelchairs. Some others live alone. In an emergency, they cannot leave on their own. They will need help, real physical assistance from trained responders. Next door is Bayberry. It's an assisted living facility with a memory care unit with 64 residents. These residents are vulnerable and will also require professional help to evacuate. Both Emerald Court and Bayberry are entirely with a 1/2-mile radius from the proposed project, much less than the 2-mile required at other areas. Yet there is only one road out of Emerald Court, and it leads toward the battery toward the battery site. That means as ambulances enter, panicked residents will be trying to escape. I know I would. Shelter in place would be impossible for me. My window frames leak, and there is an area under my cabinets that has a breeze. Toxic fumes would envelop my condo for days. I need to get out of there in a thermal fire. From this one small road leads to 3 other small roads, all branching off from Emerald Court. Each of these streets exit into our favorable Route 38. Within this small area going out to 38, there are 18 businesses with 120 employees, 20 homes, some within only 40 feet, a daycare, a large apartment complex with 250 units, all within a 1/2-mile radius. Can all these people exit to Route 38? Remember, the ambulances are going to be coming into that area. And there also is a school within 7/10 of a mile, 1,100 small children, some with special needs. If they need to evacuate, can the town of Tewksbury do this? Does the town have the resources to accomplish this? And remember, if we had to shelter in place could happen for days. Would small children be required to stay in their schools for that many days? I see my time is up. Interestingly, the new regulations that are proposed by the state for battery energy sites require that there be no residences within 2,000 feet. I live within 600 feet. The new regulations would not allow the Hillman project to move forward. But this is not about policy. This is about people, many of whom simply cannot get out on their own. If the town cannot guarantee a safe and fast evacuation, then this facility does not belong here. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Bob Wald. I live at 97 Cardigan Road, and I've been a resident of Tewksbury for 35 years. I'm also a volunteer with the Climate Group 350 Massachusetts in the Greater Lowell chapter for about 6 years. And I'm glad to hear several people say that they are in favor of environmental protection. There is a clear need for battery storage for the essential transition to clean energy. But neither 350 Lowell nor I know if this is a good site for this particular facility. Like others, I have quite a few important site-specific questions for the company, and I would like it if they get a chance to answer. Safety is my first consideration, but I want to know if there actually is a significant risk of a catastrophic fire any time in the life of the facility. Normally, there would be racks in the containers. There would be racks of maybe 100 batteries in each 20-foot container. So around 15,000 batteries in the facility. If a fire does occur in the battery in one container, what is the chance of the fire spreading to another container? Let's remember we all have a lithium battery in our pockets. So if there is somebody from the company who could answer that question, I sure would like to know the answer.
It's up to the company if they'd like to provide a response.
Sure. The UL90 testing that the batteries have to go through does test the propagation of a thermal runaway event and ensures that if there is a thermal runaway in a single container, a single battery, it will not spread to the adjacent containers.
You need to move closer to the mic, sorry.
Thank you. Thank everybody for their patience, and yours too, the whole group. By a significant risk, I mean something that is well beyond the accepted everyday risks that we all take. We drive cars, there are risks in that. We fly airplanes, there are risks in that. We go into public spaces like this one without a COVID mask, so we take risks. And is this one similar to those risks, or is it a lot more? And it's a crucial question because if a fire breaks out, and the information we have been offered here is that it won't, would it be just in one or two containers, or even the 4 in a cluster in the diagrams? And if that's, and the other part is if that size and kind of fire can be controlled by our fire department, then the neighbors would not be in danger and may not have to be evacuated. I would want the answer to be given not by a company person, but by an expert who is speaking under oath.
So, Mr. Wald, we will be having adjudicatory proceedings in this case, in which we have evidentiary hearings in which testimony is provided under oath, which will examine the broad variety of potential impacts of the project, including the safety hazards.
Good, very good. The same type of question applies to the health from the smoke that would come out of a battery fire. There are seven case studies that I saw said that the 7 states cited in the past 6 years where there's been a fire, and taken together, these case studies concluded that emissions are largely confined to the immediate vicinity of the fire, with rapid dissipation in the open air. And I could give a couple of examples. In addition, various engineering consultants have modeled the dispersion and come to the conclusion that the emissions generally do not reach levels of concern beyond the immediate fire site. So for this facility, the people who live nearby deserve to know that the smoke risk to their health from 1, 2, or 4 container fire, both on a windy day and in the direction of Emerald Court, and on a calm day, they want to know the risk. They're entitled to know the risk. And they deserve to know that, again, from an expert under oath, and not for a PR person. So there are other issues which other people can address about noise and one evacuation route that exists now, the effect on property values, and the host community benefit agreement. But it's enough time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. It's Christine Crutcher, Crutcher. I live at 1975 Middlesex Street in Lowell, but I'm a former Tewksbury resident that lived in the neighborhood at 11 Old Boston Road, and my husband's worked in town for 30 years. I come today as a volunteer from 350 of Greater Lowell, which is a climate action and climate justice group. I actually found out about this meeting from the Massachusetts Fiscal Alliance advertisements on Facebook, otherwise known as Mass Fiscal. The top donor to Mass Fiscal is the Fiscal Partners Incorporated. Fiscal Partners is a 501c6, which means that it gets most of its funding from undisclosed dues-paying members. According to a report in the Boston Globe, in 2017, Fiscal Partners made grants of over $400,000, but since the funders of Fiscal Partners are not disclosed, these donors can fund Mass Fiscal while remaining undisclosed via Fiscal Partners. So we don't know the donors to Mass Fiscal, but we do know that they're board members and staff members, and who are they? They include a failed Republican state auditor and congressional candidate, a Republican town committee chair, ex-Heritage Foundation, a member of the American Institute for Economic Research, an organization whose accomplishments include spreading disinformation about COVID during the pandemic, and who prints climate change denial propaganda, including articles such as Brazilians should keep slashing their rainforest. Mass Fiscal is a right-wing dark money organization. They don't care about the community, and they don't care about the truth. They care about protecting their financial interests. That is the only reason why they are involved with trying to stop this project. It's not about the impact on the neighborhood or the wetlands. It's about their pocketbooks. I don't know if this is the right location for this project, but I do know that climate change is a serious threat to our community. The community has a right to know the truth and the facts. We have a responsibility for our future generations to build the correct infrastructure to support a sustainable and livable planet. Thank you.